Between now and 11 o'clock, we will go straight through and have a chance to chat about law enforcement with Allegan County Sheriff Frank Baker. He joins us via the Zoom connection from the Allegan County Sheriff's Department headquarters in the old Hayworth Chair building. I still like to call it that because it's just a reminder of what it was and what purposes it is now in Allegan. Frank, good morning and welcome back to Talk of the Town.
Good morning, Gary.
Glad you are with us. And if you have a question for Sheriff Baker, we'll take it at 395-1450, 395-1450. We've already had a couple of questions for you asked or wanting us to ask before we talk about some of the things that you had in mind. When will Allegan County follow suit of most other Michigan counties, including a way to have people look up inmates' names and charges? Ottawa County has had that for a number of years. What about Allegan County there, Frank?
Yeah, that's something that we've actually discussed with county administration. It's one of those things that's a budgetary request of ours, and it has to go through that budget process. And so far, it's been something that has been receptive with the county in funding that. And we hope to probably in the near future be able to add that to our services and the improvements that we've made since moving over to this new facility. One of the things that we looked at when making that decision was, staff time. Obviously, staff time is important to us, and we have a need to make sure the staff is available to deal with the issues within the correctional center. So if we can free up people to be able to focus more on the inmate population rather than answering phones, that's helpful to us. So that's one of the things that we're looking at, to be able to provide that information online, readily available, so people can look it up rather than calling and asking the control center operator to look it up on the computer, our in-house computer system for them. So hopefully in the very near future, we'll be able to see that being implemented.
Another question that has come up was dealing with some of the requirements for the COVID-19 situation, most notably masks. We've had some incidents in this state and elsewhere where we've had people hurt, people killed because they weren't wearing masks. They were trying to enforce it along the lines. Are you seeing that this is still something that needs to be addressed by law enforcement in general and maybe the Allegan County Sheriff's Department in particular?
We have not really had a significant issue with that. The way we are handling it is that obviously we want to support our businesses. We want to make sure our business community is able to stay open and to be profitable during this challenging time. So there's a lot of businesses that require obviously state licensing, and there's a lot of oversight in regards to that, either through different things through LARA, for instance, or the health department, for instance, of like food service. So while we have not been actively engaged in the enforcement of the mask order itself, most of our involvement has come regarding what we would consider trespassing. People that maybe are not following that business's recommendation or request that they wear a mask within their facility. We haven't had a big issue with it, but that's how we plan to handle it. If and when we do have issues, is we'll ask the people to leave. It's not a matter of whether or not they're wearing a mask. It's a matter of whether or not that business is allowing them in without one. And if not, then we'll ask them to leave. And if they don't, then it'd be considered trespassing.
Does the decision by the state Supreme Court last Friday throw a little spanner in the works in trying to enforce what was first the governor's executive order? Now it's the health department's orders. It's almost as if, who's in charge here?
Well, it's been obviously a challenging year for law enforcement. We're obviously caught in the middle of a lot of different things that are happening right now. And one of those things is obviously the pandemic and the executive orders and this recent Supreme Court decision, because obviously it's changing everything. And right now we're kind of in limbo as we wait our health department's input as they're working through this to come to a decision as to how to best handle it here in Allegan County. It's our understanding right now that there's even confusion over when and if are we still under the executive order, or we do have the 21 days yet? I mean, there's a lot of questions and confusion out there, and we're trying to obviously take a common sense approach to everything. And we're working with our prosecutor, we're working with our health department, and we'll probably have a lot more decisions to be made in the very short upcoming days. But yeah, it's just one more thing to put on the pile of the challenges that we've had this year.
395-1450, 395-1450. If you have a question about law enforcement, Allegan County Sheriff Frank Baker will be happy to answer it at 395-1450. It's one thing, Frank, to enforce mandates involving the COVID-19 situation. It's another thing to try to maybe enact or enforce normal law enforcement situations, such as, say, traffic stops. That has had to be a factor as well.
Yeah, and I know we've had some questions about, what are we doing as far as traffic enforcement during this pandemic? And one of the things that I just happened to come across yesterday was our what we consider our annual Public Act 416 report. It's a report our traffic sergeant does regarding our enforcement activity for the year. It follows the state budget year, so it's October of 2019 till September of this year. And while we anecdotally kind of knew there was some changes and some things happening, this kind of reinforced that with some data that reflects kind of what we were experiencing over the summer months. Early this year, the first part of this year and the end of what we would consider 2019, so it would have been October through December, in January through March, we had increases in our the number of traffic stops our deputies had been conducting. We've got, obviously, we take a strong look at traffic enforcement here in Allegan County. It's a rural county. We have a lot of secondary roads where people travel a little too fast at times. And sometimes that involves the use of either controlled substances or alcohol in excess of what is lawfully allowed. And we had actually seen an increase in traffic stops, both by our traffic unit and by our general funded road patrol deputies. And they were as much as 16% all the way up to 34% in each of those quarters. And then when the pandemic hit, we had put out directives to our staff that there better be a good reason why you're stopping a car. We don't want to risk infecting our staff or the public. We have obviously some important responsibilities, providing public safety. And while traffic enforcement is important, we felt that it's more important that we have those staff available to respond. So during that, basically the kind of the real time when it was hot and heavy there, April to June, that what we considered our third quarter for this reporting period, we had a 34% reduction in traffic stops by our traffic unit and a 66% reduction in traffic stops by our general funded road patrol unit. And then that, of course, when you have less traffic stops, that means less tickets being written. So we ended up with a reduction in that same quarter of 32% of citations being issued by our traffic unit and 60% reduction in citations being issued by our road patrol. And then that kind of followed along to what we considered the fourth quarter. We did see some increases. One of the things that we thought was interesting was we started observing an increase in speed amongst vehicles. Obviously, when we're not stopping cars and we're not writing tickets, that deterrent effect isn't as present. And we started seeing a huge increase in the speed of vehicles traveling on our roadways. And when we started loosening up some of those restrictions, we saw some increases. Actually, our traffic unit had an increase of 40% in the number of citations issued compared to last year in that same quarter. So hopefully we're going to get back to being an enforcement unit and a deterrent, and we can get the speed down on our roads and make sure that we're doing what we can to make sure they're safe.
There are two things along the lines of traffic enforcement I want to touch upon with you, Frank Baker, the Allegan County Sheriff. First of all, it doesn't involve Allegan County, it involves Kent County. But the state police, along with the local law enforcement in Kent and in Wayne counties, are having extra enforcement tying in with flashing signs to try to cut down on distracted driving, texting while driving. Michigan State University is conducting a study to see whether or not these signs that will be dynamic signs that can be changed at a moment's notice could have a factor in cutting down on this. Obviously, again, Allegan County is not a part of this, but certainly texting and distracted driving is something that has to be a concern for those in brown, in your case, or in blue, with the case of the state police or local law enforcement.
Certainly, and it's something that obviously that's kind of new to law enforcement, the whole idea of all the opportunities for drivers to be distracted. When I grew up, it was because you went through the drive-through and you had a hamburger in your hand or something, and that might be the distraction. Or if you're a young person, you have a tendency to have a lot of friends in the car, and they may be talking and acting out a little bit, and that might be distracting. But our young drivers today are under a tougher time because of the distraction of all the electronics media that we have, our cell phones, our GPS units, our cars themselves with the built-in entertainment opportunities that they have. It's tough for them. And we know that in order for us to make sure that we're keeping them safe, we have to do the enforcement side of that. So it's one of the things that we do. In fact, we've received grants over the last few years from the state to put additional patrols out during certain periods of time just to enforce that distracted driving. And it's I see it myself. Obviously with law enforcement, we have a lot of distractions in the car. Working road patrol, I haven't done that in a long time, but you have the onboard computer, you have the police radio. Obviously, we have cell phones as well. So it's a challenge, and we want to make sure that our roads are safe for especially our younger drivers, because we know that is a real concern, and that is one of the key age groups that are impacted by distracted driving.
The other thing about traffic enforcement that sometimes gets overlooked until we have a tragedy is dealing with school buses and making sure that we follow the law and follow the rules about school buses. And I know we get a little frustrated. We as motorists get a little frustrated because sometimes bus drivers, it has the impression they're sort of relishing the fact they have control and they don't, step aside for let the motorists go through and stuff like that. But still, the laws are there to be taken care of, and Operation Safe Stop is dealing with that.
Right, and that's something that's going to be happening in a couple of weeks here. The 19th through the 23rd of this month is Operation Safe Stop. It's not necessarily something that we have additional patrols on, but we're going to be directing our patrols to watch out for this. Obviously, we watch out for it all the time, but I think this year is especially important. This year is a crazy year. It's a strange year. I mean, I think a lot of us that no longer have kids in school, like myself, is school going on right now, or are they taking classes from home? You just don't really know. So it's not the clear. Everybody knew in September came, kids were in school. Now I think there's some confusion over who's in, who's out. There isn't necessarily, and I don't know if there's the same amount of transportation going on with buses, but we do know it's important that we probably do this right now, because we want to make sure that our schools have a safe school year. And like you mentioned, I can't think of a bigger tragedy than a child being struck by a vehicle. Nobody wants to be in that position, either as a parent or a family member or a friend or a driver themselves. So we're going to be watching carefully for this. So make sure that when you see those red lights on, that you do stop. And like you mentioned, usually most of these drivers are courteous enough. They pull to the side and let the vehicles that have sat behind them around, so they don't have to wait for multiple bus stops. But remember, I mean, those kids, their lives are precious, and we got to do what we can to make sure that they're safe.
395-1450 if you have a question for Allegan County Sheriff Frank Baker. And again, Operation Safe Stop is the 16th of I'm not mistaken there, Frank?
The week of October 19th through the 23rd.
Okay, the 19th through the 23rd. Just want to keep that in mind. This is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, Frank, and obviously, whenever there's a family domestic call, it is something we've talked about. I've talked about with your colleague in Ottawa County, Steve Kempker, and other law enforcement agencies. That's the toughest call sometimes to make. We got a domestic situation here, and you've got to try to address this. And a lot of times, domestic violence stems from domestic incidents, and certainly this is a very important month.
Yeah, it is. We always recognize Domestic Violence Awareness Month to, as it says, raise awareness to this problem. It's something that is a big part of what we do, is responding to domestic violence calls. It's something that is there. It's happening all the time. And obviously, we know that through studies that have been done, it's a cycle where kids that grow up in a home where domestic violence occurs are apt to repeat it in their home once they're adults and have children. So it's something that's important to us. And one of the things that we like to do is help promote our our domestic violence shelter. As we talked, it's a strange year, and it's really tough this year on our nonprofit organizations, the ones that we rely on as a community to provide those services that that the government just can't do. And one of the things that they're doing is tomorrow evening, Sylvia's Place, our domestic violence shelter, is holding a virtual event. Basically, what they're asking you to do is to either register online and be a part of that, or attend or go to dinner or order out from a lot of the local restaurants that are helping support this Domestic Violence Awareness Month and our shelter. And they're giving proceeds from the sales during a period of time. I believe it's 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. tomorrow night to Sylvia's Place to help fund them during this challenging time of reaching out to the community. So we'd ask you to go to their website, go to their Facebook page. It's Sylvia's Place here in Allegan, our domestic violence shelter, and do what you can to help support them, because they're there for you when you need them. And they actually do a lot to help us in law enforcement by providing a resource to the victims. And they help those victims that either can't get out of a domestic violence situation, or they're trying to get out of a domestic violence situation. So we would ask you to think about them during this time and to help support that cause.
He is Allegan County Sheriff Frank Baker. One final thing before we button up our conversation. This will be the last time we can chat before October 30th, October 31st. And I know some communities still are going trick-or-treating. Be aware of the youngsters going about.
Yeah, and I know it's kind of really up in the air as to what communities are, what communities aren't, but I'm sure there'll be some that are. And every year we do talk about this a little bit, just because obviously we don't want a tragedy occurring. But for their drivers, make sure you slow down, especially in these residential areas. You got to anticipate those extra pedestrians walking. One of the things that I know I've noticed is children get excited. They're having a good time, they're having fun, and they have a tendency to dart out into the road, oftentimes from between vehicles. And as a motorist, you're just not going to be able to see that or anticipate that quick enough to sometimes prevent an accident. So to really slow down, anticipate that happening, take a little extra time at those intersections to make sure you're observing and looking for them. And again, another one of those distracted driving things, make sure you put the cell phones away during that time, because you need to be extra cautious, and you need to really look out during that critical dusk hour when our vision is changing. It's actually probably even tougher then.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Frank, I wish we could have more time for tips, but we got to get scooting here because it is the top of the hour. Allegan County Sheriff Frank Baker, thank you very much for joining us today on WHTC's Talk of the Town. Look forward to chatting with you again in the month of November.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. That's Allegan County Sheriff Frank Baker.